All right, this is Numbers 1 in the Dennis Prager Rational Bible. All right, now I forgot to mention this in the intro video, but I'll go ahead and do it for this one. Chapter 1 starts off with more of a intro to the book. So I'll go ahead and check it out. So the book of Numbers is the fourth book of the Torah, which of course is the Hebrew name for the first 5 books of the Bible. But it's not a continuation of the preceding book, Leviticus. It begins where the second book, Exodus, ends. It opens early in the second year of the Israelites' 40-year sojourn in the desert. In the late Chief Rabbi of the United Kingdom, Lord Jonathan Sacks, he described Numbers this way. Numbers is a difficult book, the most challenging of the 5 Mosaic books. It contains an extraordinary range of texts, genres, and subject matters. There are narratives, laws, census lists, itineraries, details of how tribes encamped and traveled on their journeys, and laws about wives suspected of adultery, Nazarites, vows, purifications, sacrifices, and sundry other matters alongside cases that Moses himself had to bring to God for adjudication. And there are accounts of battles, rebellions, and collective failures of nerve, and a strange story about a pagan prophet and a talking donkey. Numbers is indeed a difficult book, and its English title is not particularly inviting. As one biblical scholar writes in his commentary on Numbers, quote, "The title seems as interesting as a book named, for example, Telephone Directory. It is," end of quote. It is unfortunate that in this case the name of the book was not taken from the Hebrew, Bidmidbar, however you say that, which just means in the wilderness, a much more inviting name than Numbers. End of quote there too. In Numbers takes place during Israel's wandering in the wilderness of Sinai following the Exodus from Egypt. It begins with the Israelites still at Mount Sinai, where they received the 10 Commandments, committed the sin of the golden calf idolatry, and erected the portable sanctuary, the Mishkan, all of which are described in Exodus, which I guess would be the tabernacle. In the book preceding Numbers, Leviticus, it contains almost no narrative. It's primarily devoted to laws concerning sacrifices, priests, dietary practices, and sexual relations, as well as some of the Torah's most sublime ethical commands, including love your neighbor as yourself, Leviticus 19:18. In the words of Richard Elliott Friedman, a professor of Jewish studies at the University of Georgia, Number describes, quote, "the only age in the Bible in which miracle, the providing of manna to eat, the columns of cloud by day and the fire by night lead the way, is a daily fact of life," end of quote. There are 2 helpful ways of describing the chapters of Numbers. One was proposed by Dennis T. Olson, professor of Old Testament theology at Princeton Theological University. So here's how he divides the chapters. Section 1, the death of the old generation, the first Exodus generation. That would be the first 25 chapters. Section 2, the second Exodus generation prepares to take the land of Canaan. It's chapters 26 through 36. Olson's division sees the 2 census documents. The first one, of course, in this first chapter, and then the second one in chapter 26. So this Olson guy sees the 2 census doctrines as documents as forming the pillars of these two sections: the census of the old generation and the census of the second generation. And a second way of dividing the book is proposed by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who divides Numbers into 3 sections. Here's what he has to say. Numbers is precisely structured to dramatize in a way unique to the Torah, the counterpoint between order and chaos. It is divided into 3 sections. The first, chapters 1 through 10, as the Israelites prepare to begin the second half of their journey, is a remarkable portrayal of order within the camp. Then, in chapters 11 through 25, comes the chaos, dissension in the camp, complaints about food, and finally Moses' own brother and sister criticizing him. And after this stark contrast between order and chaos comes part 3, in chapters 26 through 36, in which a new beginning is made, starting symbolically with the new census and new generation. From here on, there are no rebellions, only order prevails. Okay, so basically you got order, chaos, and then order again. Alright, well that's all of the intro there. Now I'll go ahead and start chapter 1. Verse 1. On the first day of the second month in the second year following the Exodus from the land of Egypt, the Lord spoke to Moses. Alright. We take for granted God spoke to Moses and to the whole Israelite people at Sinai and later to the prophets. But as R.K. Harrison, professor of Old Testament studies at the University of Toronto, points out, quote, speech is a particular characteristic of the God of creation and was used frequently in Hebrew history to demonstrate his superiority over the false gods of the pagan Near East, who were mute and thus unable to communicate with their votaries, or their religious devotees. But Israel's supreme deity summed up within himself the essence of life and was able to verbalize his own moral and spiritual qualities to his people, and beyond them to any others who would hear and obey his voice. End quote. And the first thing God did after creating the heavens and the earth was speak, and God said, "Let there be light." Genesis 1:3. In Numbers alone, God speaks more than 150 times. All right, continuing with verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. So the Hebrew name for this book, Bimidbar, I can't read Hebrew, so I'm just trying, but it's taken from the words in the wilderness. The Hebrew name for each book of the Torah is taken from a word in the book's opening verse. So basically, I guess maybe it should be called Numbers and then parentheses in the wilderness. Maybe as subtitle, but whatever. And then the Bible translator and commentator Robert Alter, professor of Hebrew and comparative literature at the University of California, Berkeley, notes this, quote, in this case, the convention of selecting the first significant word in the text as title fortuitously produces an apt characterization of the book, which is all about wilderness wanderings and trials and upheavals, end quote. And there is an additional non-literal understanding of Numbers that I find meaningful. All right, Prager, what is it? Our lives are lived mostly in the long and ordinary sketches of the wilderness, not in the revelations or epiphanies and dramatic events of the Exodus. The purpose of life, therefore, is not about relying on excitement, let alone miracles, nor on getting into our promised land. Not even Moses could achieve that, but how we live and find meaning in the wilderness. And the wilderness is where God gave the Israelites, and by extension all of humanity, the Ten Commandments. In the desert, writes the great political philosopher named Eric Vogelin, however you say that, Vogelin. He says this: the tribes found their God, they entered into a covenant with him, and thereby became his people. End quote. And then Jonathan Sacks elucidates the importance of the desert to the God-man encounter. The word midbar, which means wilderness, also invokes associations with davar, the word, and medaber, the speaker of the word. It is there in no man's land that the Israelites had the most sustained and intense encounter with the God who transcends the universe, the austere, invisible God of monotheism, identified neither with nature familiar to the farmer nor the pinnacle of hierarchy of power such as familiar to the dwellers of cities. You have, as it were, to be nowhere to encounter the God of everywhere. In the silence of the desert, you will hear the voice of God, and in the isolation of the desert, you will find yourself alone with God. End quote. All right, and then continuing the end of verse 1. So God spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting. So the tent of meeting, of course, the tabernacle, which traveled along with the Israelites, was where God most often spoke to Moses. Jacob Milgrom, the professor of Near Eastern Studies at the University of California, Berkeley, aptly described it as portable Sinai. And then you get to verse 2. Take a census of the whole Israelite community by the clans of its ancestral houses, listing the names, every male, head by head. So, the idea of taking this census must have been particularly important, since the order to do so came from God himself. Census taking was a common practice in the ancient world, as it is in the modern. Usually ancient censuses, it's hard to say that, were conducted for military purposes to determine the number of men able to fight. As is apparent in the next verse, that would seem to be the case here. And this is probably the primary reason neither women nor children were counted. Yeah, because you're counting the men who would be able to go fight. Yep, and you get to that in verse 3. You and Aaron shall record them by their groups from the ages of 20 years and up, all of those in Israel who are able to bear arms. So by including Aaron conducting the census, God reinforced Aaron's leadership position, and this might have been a way of raising his morale and prestige after his humiliation during the golden calf debacle, which he did help build that calf, and he shouldn't have done that, and also giving him a sense of purpose after the death of his two sons. Yeah, his two sons, Nadab and Abihu, who offered strange fire to the Lord, and God burned them up for that. And all able-bodied men, those who are able to bear arms, over the age of 20 were to serve in the Israelite army. No maximum age is given, but every male who could was expected to participate in the Israelites' battles. If not as a soldier, then in some other capacity. And the modern critique of war is old men make wars that the young men fight. But that was not applicable to Israel, to ancient Israel. All right, and then you get to verse 4. Associated with you shall be a man from each tribe, each one the head of his ancestral home. And then you get to this next section, the antiquity of the names. Verse 5, these are the names of the men who shall assist you. So Milgram points out these are all very ancient names, a testament to the antiquity of the text. 16 of the 24 names mentioned here they never recur in later books of the Bible. And they are listed, that they are listed at all, it bears the testimony to their antiquity, to their being contemporaneous with Moses. For another reason, their names would have meant nothing to any generation other than Moses's. And then another argument for the antiquity of these names is advanced by this professor, Ronald B. Allen, senior professor of Bible exposition at Dallas Theological Seminary. He said this: the antiquity of this list of names is revealed by the fact that many are built on the names El, which means God, Shaddai, traditionally translated as Almighty, Ami, which is my kinsman, Zur, rock, and Av, father, end quote. The names are listed by tribe. All right, from Reuben, Eliezer, son of Shedeur. From Simeon, Shulamel, son of Shurish Shurish Adai. I guess that's how you say it. These are hard to pronounce. From Judah, Nishon, son of Aminadab. From Issachar, Nathaniel, son of Zuar. From Zebulun, Eliab, son of Helon. And from the sons of Joseph, from Ephraim, Elishma, the son of Ammihud. And from Manasseh, Gamaliel, son of Pedahzur. And from Benjamin, Abidan, the son of Gideoni. And from Dan, Ahazur, the son of Ammishaddai. And from Asher, Pagiel, son of Akron. And from Gad, Eliasaph, son of Duel. And from Naphtali, Ahira, son of Enon, or Enon, I guess that's maybe how you say it. And these are the elected of the assembly, the chieftains of their ancestral tribes. They are heads of the contingents of Israel. And so Moses and Aaron took those men who were designated by name, and on the first day of the second month, they convoked the whole community, who were restored by the clans of their ancestral homes, the names of those aged 20 years and over being listed head by head. 19. As the Lord commanded Moses, so he recorded them in the wilderness of Sinai. 20. They totaled as follows: the descendants of Reuben, Israel's firstborn, the registration of the clans of their ancestral house, as listed by name, head by head, all the males aged 20 years and over, all who were able to bear arms, those enrolled from the tribe of Reuben, 46,500. And of the descendants of Simeon, the registration of the clans of their ancestral house, their enrollment is listed by name, head by head, all the males aged 20 years and over, all who were able to bear arms, those enrolled from the tribe of Simeon, 59,300. And of the descendants of Gad, the registration of the clans of their ancestral home, as listed by name, aged 20 years and over, all who were able to bear arms, those enrolled from the tribe of Gad, 45,650. In verse 26, of the descendants of Judah, the registration of the clans of their ancestral house is listed by name, aged 20 years and over, all who were able to bear arms, those enlisted from the tribe of Judah, 74,600. And of the descendants of Issachar, the registration of their clans of their ancestral home is listed by name, aged 20 years and over, all who were able to bear arms, those enrolled from the tribe of Issachar, 54,400. And of the descendants of Zebulun, the registration of the clans of their ancestral home is listed by name, aged 20 years and over, all who were able to bear arms, those enrolled from the tribe of Zebulun, 57,400. And of the descendants of Joseph, verse 32, there's a little note. Unlike the other sons of Jacob, Joseph, the most beloved, was given a double share of the inheritance. Therefore, 2 tribes, named after Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, descend from him, and there's no tribe named Joseph. Alright, so of the descendants of Ephraim, the registration of the clans of their ancestral house is listed by name, age 20 years and over, all who were able to bear arms, those enrolled from the tribe of Ephraim, 40,500. And of the descendants of Manasseh, the registration of the clans of their ancestral house is listed by name, age 20 years and over, all who were able to bear arms, those enrolled from the tribe of Manasseh, 32,200. And of the descendants of Benjamin, the registration of the clans of their ancestral house is listed by name, age 20 years and over, all who were able to bear arms, those enrolled from the tribe of Benjamin, 35,400. And of the descendants of Dan, the registration of the clans of their ancestral house is listed by name, age 20 years and over, all who were able to bear arms, those enrolled from the tribe of Dan, 62,700. And of the descendants of Asher, the registration of the clans of their ancestral house is listed by name, age 20 years and over, all who were able to bear arms, those enrolled from the tribe of Asher, 41,500. And of the descendants of Naphtali, the registration of the clans of their ancestral house is listed by name, age 20 years and over, all who were able to bear arms, those enrolled from the tribe of Naphtali, 53,400. Alright, verse 44. Those are the enrollments recorded by Moses and Aaron and by the chieftains of Israel, who were 12 in number, 1 man to each ancestral house. And all the Israelites aged 20 years and over, enrolled by ancestral houses, my bad. All of those in Israel who were able to bear arms, 46. All who were enrolled came to 603,550. Alright, here's a little essay that Prager has here. The problem of the number of Israelites in the Torah. So this total number includes only males above the age of 20, which means that the entire Israelite population would have consisted of at least 2 million people, and far likely more. For reasons explained at Exodus 12:37, it seems quite unlikely that more than 2 million Israelites were wandering in the desert. One solution to this problem may be that the Hebrew word, which usually means thousand, Eliaf, however you say that, has another meaning which just means group or contingent, or maybe clan, I don't know. Indeed, that very word appears in verse 16, where it is translated as contingents. My view is that here, as often in the Torah, numbers are meant to teach lessons, not necessarily to convey arithmetic precision. The repeated use of the number 40 is such an example. So, in the Noah's Ark story of the flood, it rained for 40 days. Moses led the Israelites in the desert 40 years. He twice went up on Mount Sinai for 40 days to receive God's laws. In the desert, he sent spies for 40 days to investigate the land promised to the Israelites. To cite one post-Torah example, the prophet Jonah warned the citizens of ancient Nineveh for 40 days that they would be destroyed if they didn't repent. As scholar R.K. Henderson, he lived from 1920 to 1993, professor of Old Testament at Wycliffe College, University of Toronto, he writes this: the numeral figures are to be taken as symbols of relative power, triumph, importance, and they are and the like and are not meant to be understood either strictly literally or as an extent in a corrupt textual form. And Ronald B. Allen offers an explanation from the number of Israelites I cite at length because of the importance of taking numbers and by extension taking the Torah seriously. So here's what Allen says. We know of indisputable examples of the rhetorical use of numbers in the Torah. For example, thousands of myriads in Genesis 24:60, the blessing on Rebekah by her family, and myriads of thousands in Numbers 10:36, the words of blessing in the battle song of Moses. It appears possible to me that the figures given in the two census lists for the army of Israel may be a magnification by a factor of 10. An army of about 60,000 men would fit what we know of the criteria of the region and the times. So the suggestion of a rhetorical exaggeration by a factor of 10 has much to commend it. It is a simple answer that does not demand convolutions in numbers that other suggestions require, and it takes into account the round number nature of each integer. It fits in nicely with the approximation of 600,000 as a multiple of 50,000 times 12, the number of the tribes. It results in an army of excess of 60,000 men with a total population of about 250 to 300,000. An army of 60,000 is not a sufficient force, but it was likely smaller than the combined armies of the city-states of Canaan at the time. In this way, the peoples of Israel must have seemed to be a swarm as they lived in Egypt, but they were the smallest of the nations. Deuteronomy 7:7, when ranked with the great world powers. So this smaller number accords with the large, but not supernatural force the Egyptian Pharaoh sent in pursuit of them to the Red Sea. So 600 chariots, Exodus 14:7, is a considerable force and would surely be a death threat against the unorganized people of Israel. Perhaps the strongest textual support for this magnification of the numbers of the people by a factor of 10 is found in the text describing the redemption of the firstborn sons of the families of Israel in Numbers 3:40 through 51. And the number of the firstborn sons above the age of 1 month was calculated to be 22,273. Numbers 3:43. So in the section of the book in which all the other sums appear to be rounded, this is the only figure that is specific to the digit. And further, it is far too small a sum to represent a population of millions. Such would require that each family in Israel would have had to produce upwards of 50 children, a number unbearable. Yeah, pun intended. But the quantity of 22,273 would work admirably with the population 1/10 the common conclusion, that is 250,000 persons. In this case, live births and surviving children would be more in the range of 5 per family. Unknown to me at the time I was writing this first edition of this commentary, then doctrinal student David M. Fouts was working on his dissertation on large numbers in the Old Testament, particularly in the records of the monarchy. His conclusions, drawn especially from Akkadian records, indicate a widespread use of what he calls the ancient Near Eastern literary convention of numerical hyperbole in military contexts, often with a factor of 10 or 60 in cultures where the sexagesimal system prevailed. Okay. It is an abuse of literal interpretation to insist that the way we use numbers in our digital and pocket calendar age is the way the biblical persons did in fact use numbers in their day. So I guess maybe this 603,000 I guess is not meant to be taken literally. I guess it's just like an exaggerated number. Yeah, by like a factor of 10, as he was saying. So probably you would maybe really have an army. So maybe it was really 60,000. So, and in that case, maybe you would have had maybe 250 to 300,000 maybe in total. So, and then of course using the cases, using some other scriptures to say that they were a pretty small group of people, I guess, to help further this argument that maybe really it wasn't really that many, and I guess therefore it's not really a literal number. Yeah, which I guess is a pretty interesting case. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it could be. Maybe that number is literal. That's interesting. All right. Why the Levite tribe was not counted in the census. All right, verse 47. The Levites, however, were not recorded among them by their ancestral tribe. So the Levites were set aside for a specific religious role. Therefore, like the clergy in modern society, they were exempt from military service. Since the primary goal of the census was to establish the number of men available for military service, they were not included in the census. All right, verse 48. For the Lord had spoken to Moses, saying, Do not on any account enroll the tribe of Levi or take a census of them with the Israelites. You shall put the Levites in charge of the tabernacle of the pact, all its furnishings, and everything that pertains to it. They shall carry the tabernacle and all its furnishings, and they shall tend it, and they shall camp around the tabernacle. Okay. So the pact refers to the 10 Commandments, which were kept in the Ark of the Covenant. God said, the question of who should serve in the tabernacle should be determined by birth. Only those who were born into the tribe of the Levites could fulfill this role. Today, we tend to assume that leaders should be chosen based on their abilities and experience rather than on their bloodline. However, whereas democracy can work in the secular realm, it cannot prevail in religious life. If religion were democratic, right and wrong would be determined by the people rather than God. If people had been able to vote on the Ten Commandments, for instance, it's unlikely that they would have passed them as written, and they certainly would have changed them over time. And the Levites were designated to tend to spiritual matters. Their primary role was to keep faith in God alive among the Israelites. And the tabernacle was under the control of the Levites, with different members of the Levite tribe playing different roles. That'll be talked about in Numbers 4. And the descendants of Aaron were designated as priests, that is, those in charge of sacrifices and temple rituals, whereas the rest of the Levites were responsible for helping the priests and educating the Israelites, basically teaching them to observe God's laws. I explain why the Levite role had to be hereditary rather than chosen by popular vote in this essay called The Benefits of a Hereditary Priesthood in his Exodus Rational Bible. So if you have that, you can go check that out. And that essay is at Exodus 28 verse 1. So, well, I don't have that with me, so I'm not going to go through it. But if you have it for yourself, you can go check that out. Not all the Israelites were expected to perform the same roles. The priests served in the tabernacle, the Levites helped the priest, and the rest of the people fought in battle and attended to other matters. The large majority, as was true of humankind up through much of the 19th century, in agriculture. Yeah, the large majority were in agriculture. All right, 51. When the tabernacle is to set out, the Levites shall take it down, and when the tabernacle is to be pitched, the Levites shall set it up, and any outsider who encroaches shall be put to death. Only the Levites were allowed to go near the tabernacle. By instituting a harsh punishment for anyone who tried to usurp the religious duties of the Levites, the Torah prevents the Israelites from fighting for religious power and minimizes, nothing can fully eliminate, it minimizes the possibility of corruption. During the time of the Second Temple, at the period where the Romans had acquired political power over Judea, corrupt priests would bribe the Roman authorities and take over positions at the temple, including the position of the high priest. And then verse 52. The Israelites shall encamp troop by troop, each man with his division and each under his standard. 53. The Levites, however, shall camp around the tabernacle of the pact, that wrath may not strike the Israelite community, and the Levites shall stand guard around the tabernacle of the pact. And then 54. The Israelites did accordingly, just as the Lord commanded Moses, so they did. All right, well, that's actually the end of chapter 1 in the Prager Rational Bible. And Lord willing, I'll get to chapter 2 of MacArthur and then Prager. But until then, may God bless you and the grace and mercy won by Jesus, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all.